That is the story of my life. Okay. Well, it's wonderful to see that there's such an amazing mix of library directors and board members in the room together today. I am speaking to both groups. That was my thought as I was kind of putting this together. I talk about advocacy a lot with our students, many of whom will be library directors or library staff, but I do think there is a special lens that we can apply to advocacy for our board members in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in here and share my screen. Before I start, I guess I just want to set a clear purpose for the work that we want to do today. Defining advocacy and thinking carefully about what it really is, I believe, is the first step towards successful advocacy in libraries. And then that's all well and good, but thinking about actionable steps, real things that we can say and do in order to advocate effectively for our library is the bulk of the conversation today. And I would like for all of you to walk away with 3 things that you can go into your libraries and into your communities and start doing today, tomorrow, in order to feel that you are being cheerleaders and advocates for your organizations. Merriam-Webster is always the right choice when it comes to finding your base definition. And what I would highlight here, the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal, is the action that's involved. It is an active statement. This is not feeling positive towards libraries or having a nice feeling about something. Advocacy is action-oriented. So the next question then is, well, why do we need to advocate for libraries? People like libraries. Everybody knows they're good, right? In general, public perception of libraries is very strong. People have a high trust in librarians. And I think it's important that we start here. So if you would humor me, anybody, and you might have to translate for folks who are farther away from the mic, Tammy, but if you could, in 10 words or less, tell me why your library is important. I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm doing it on purpose. Why is your library important?
Brings different age groups, different ethnic groups, different interest areas together in a neutral, safe environment.
I heard some amazing descriptive words. I'm so sorry because I'm just getting to know you all. Was that a board member or a director that was speaking?
It was a board member.
Oh, 10 points. That was a really good response. Okay, anybody else? Now that we've cut through the first response, anybody want to add on?
How could you talk that? That's great.
Place to gather information.
Place to gather information. Great.
A place to come and learn a new skill. Just saw hopeful, we're going to bring virtual out. So you walk a different library, and I can go to all pinpoint libraries. You get all kinds of new ideas, and then they're so willing to share.
And in our rural settings, we are the place people come to get their questions answered and to get help with that.
It's a place to have access to technical equipment, if you will, where you might not have those things at home. You might not have a printer. You might not have a computer.
Absolutely. All true and amazing responses. And it makes me smile to hear you talk passionately about your libraries. But it was hard, right? I put you on the spot when I said 10 words or less, why does your library matter? Go. it's hard, not just for you all, but for all librarians and for many of us. Historically, we're very focused on what libraries do. And we're really good at it. We're really good at answering questions. We're really good at helping people gather information, at helping them learn a new skill, at providing access to technology. I mean, the work that librarians do is absolutely incredible. And we know that, and we're really good at doing that. But librarians are often not very good about talking about that work that they do and telling people not just what they do, but why it matters. And while telling people, hey, we have DVDs and we have a 3D printer and we might even have a virtual reality set and we have a computer for you to help you apply for your job, those things might generate some kind of oohs and ahs, but it doesn't really win hearts and minds. It doesn't really lead to real, true support for the library. It's just kind of a nice soundbite in a conversation. And the truth is, most people really don't know what our impact is. They haven't thought about it because we're not communicating it intentionally in many cases. And instead of listing off the services that we provide, I would like for us to move to a place where we're talking about the purpose of the library's work. So, for example, and I actually did hear quite a bit of purpose in your responses, to be fair, which was amazing. That verbiage of equitable access, neutrality, learning new skills and experiences, that's such great stuff. But phrasing that we don't often think to use for our libraries are, do you know that our libraries play a critical role in sustaining healthy communities? So many libraries who were offering COVID shots to people through the pandemic, who offer food pantries, who have a wealth of health and wellness resources. I met a librarian recently at a conference who is certified to help people apply for Medicaid. Another talking point, libraries preserve local history. Libraries serve as a refuge for vulnerable populations. Libraries contribute to environmental sustainability through our shared collections, through the facilities that are open to our communities, through the community gardens that we grow and tend. Libraries are a civilizing agency in democracy. They provide a neutral forum in which people can talk about all types of information and viewpoints in a way that is productive and find an equal voice. That's powerful stuff. So the hard news that I have to give you today is that library use does not equal library support. I hate this. I hate that Patrick Esser and his friends at Every Library Institute did all of this research and determined that there is no correlation between the number of people who use your library or who hold active cards in your community and their willingness to vote for you, fund you, invest in you. So what does that really mean? I mean, we're talking about the people who are checking out our books won't necessarily vote for an increase in funding. But how is that possible when people overwhelmingly trust librarians and public opinion is positive? How do we untangle all of that? I believe that it's because checking out books, people don't necessarily equate that to the value add of our institution, to the reasons for existence, to all of those statements that I just made. We have to help them get there. They're not going to get there on their own. And also, our world is really accustomed to being sold to. PR has become an amazing and powerful industry. Marketing is so sophisticated and people are constantly living in this barrage of social media posts and amazing advertisements and technology that is designed to hit the centers of our brain that give us the dopamine rush. And so if we are relying solely on the fact that, no, people trust us, people like us, people know that the library is good, that's just simply not enough. We're not on their radar. We're not in their thought processes nearly enough. So that old adage of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, apparently it still applies. And so thinking about how we can be in the thick of conversations and on people's radar again and again is critical to ensuring that we sustain support. Okay, so there are two types of advocacy. Now that we know what advocacy is, and we've talked about why advocacy is really important, thinking about these two types is also a big piece of this. So there is reactive advocacy. Lori Fisher, and by the way, I'll send these slides to Tammy, and I've hyperlinked to a lot of resources here if you want to dig into any of this. But Lori Fisher categorizes reactive advocacy as responding to a crisis situation. And reactive advocacy, by the way, is inevitable because the storms of life pop up, whether those are weather storms that take off your roof or they're political storms that lead to people challenging your books. These things absolutely will happen. A good example of reactive advocacy is all of the work that you all did when you did an about face, a complete 180, and reorganized and designed all of your services in response to the COVID pandemic. And then how you talk to people about the fact that you were there and you were doing those things and you were still serving them. Powerful reactive advocacy. Proactive advocacy is this action ahead of time. It's an investment, taking the initiative to engage in positive conversation and develop relationships that support your cause. If we wait to advocate, if we're only thinking about the reactive advocacy opportunities, we will be very, very behind the curve. I'm going to focus a lot on proactive advocacy throughout the rest of this conversation, but I really believe that a lot of the steps that we will implement in proactive advocacy actually make us better, strong reactive advocates as well. The two are completely intertwined. So who are our advocates? Board members. Why are you here listening to a conversation about advocates and advocacy? Obviously, librarians need to advocate for the services that we do and that we provide. But we can't just be the only ones talking about this good work that we do and the value that we add, even though those librarians are highly trusted in our society. If we are the only ones who show up in our communities and talk about how amazing we are, that can feel false or self-interested, or like we are simply wanting to ensure our own next paycheck. And so while we have enormous amounts of important information to share about the good work that we do, the really powerful messaging about our important work comes from board members. It comes from invested community members. It comes from other people who really understand the need and value of libraries within the community. So hopefully you walk away today with a toolkit that then empowers you to be successful in this space, because this is a tall ask. It takes some courage and it takes a lot of emotional energy to step out into our communities and do this kind of good advocacy work. We really need our sort of true believers to take on this task and sow the seeds that will change perception or enhance that awareness about what we do. Okay. So let's get to the fun part, which is building the toolkit for advocacy. And I guess before I should pause here. I'm never good about the pause. What questions do you have about any of this at this point, or comments? What are you thinking as you hear all of this? So I'm not hearing any questions, which is fine. I haven't quite figured out what the appropriate Zoom pause length is, because I can't read the room quite like I would otherwise, but Unless Tammy tells me, wait, I'm going to keep going.
Yep, keep on going. It's great information.
Okay, all right, onward we go then. Okay, these toolkits are pretty simple. You only need two things. You need community alignment and you need library stories. So I want to start with stories. That's my favorite part. Information does not drive behavior. I mentioned that earlier, and that seems very strange. And that's actually kind of a tough concept for we librarians to accept because we know how important and powerful information is. But it is emotions that actually drive behavior and are responsible for decision making. Just a little bit of biology for you. The outer layers of our brain, that's called the neocortex, are responsible for things like processing information, data, information gathering, rational thought. It's also responsible for language. So me talking to you right now, all my neocortex. The inner layers of our brain are the limbic brain, and that's responsible for things like trust, loyalty, and decision making. It has no capacity for language. So it's really how you feel that is responsible for the decisions that you make. Now, obviously, information can contribute to how we feel, but it's not going to actually make the determination for the action. That's why stories are so important. And I'll continue to unpack this, but I'm just going to start this by sharing a story. Oh, there's my cool brain slide. So I'm being vulnerable by sharing this with you because I always cry whenever I tell this story, so I'll just apologize in advance. But I'm willing to be vulnerable because I think it's a great way to frame the importance and the power of stories. So a little bit about me. Before I came to higher ed, I worked in public libraries for a long time, and I love public libraries with my whole heart and soul. And while I worked in big systems and I worked in small systems, rural libraries are my very favorite because we get to do all the things, and it is so readily apparent the impact of our work. When I was finished with my library degree, I had this cool job where I got to administer a grant in a big library system. And we decided that we would use this money to offer STEAM programming. So if you're not familiar with that acronym, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And so we were running all over this city, offering multiple programs a week, doing all kinds of cool things like learning math and doing science experiments and participating in musical activities and making magic shows and flying paper airplanes. And it was absolutely amazing. And I was turning in program statistics of almost 1,000 kids a month who were attending these programs. I felt pretty good about that. Those were really awesome numbers. And it sounds really nice, right? And that 1,000 child number that we were able to reach is a good talking point. And that's one way to talk about the success of those programs. But another way to talk about those is to share Mary's story, which is what I'm going to do now. So one of our favorite programs, and there's probably some library directors in the room that worked with Michael Fitzsimmons, who helps kids make a drum, and then he teaches them how to do some percussion work. So we brought in old picture frames that were empty, and you take packing tape and you wrap them really, 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 really tight, and you've got a homemade drum. And then we were able to use our money to buy sticks for everybody. So every kid who comes to this program gets their own pair of sticks. Of course, we feed these kids pizza and we play games, and it's just a really fun evening. And we always did it after hours, so the library was shut down and they could be as loud as they wanted. We were doing one of these programs, and in walked a mother and her child, and this little girl's name was Mary, and Mary had a lot of physical challenges. She was severely limited in her mobility. She used a walker to get around. It was hard for her to breathe. She was very sick and had to stay in her house most of the time. She didn't get to socialize with other kids her age very often because that was dangerous for her in a lot of instances. And because she was not in the school system with the other kids, she hadn't had an opportunity to meet many other people. And her mom said she had a lot of anxiety and sadness about that. But Mary saw the flyer for this program and she loved music. So she told her mom that she wanted to come. So it was a very big deal that her mom was able to bring her. And she came over and her mom introduced her and we said, "Hi, we're so glad that you're here." And the night went on and the other kids who were at that library program made room for Mary at the table when they were eating pizza together. And we did some introduction icebreakers and everybody got to know each other and we were kind of giggling and laughing and Mary's smile got bigger and bigger the whole night. So at the end of the night, we formed our drum circle and everybody had kind of made friends at this point. And the last activity that you do is we all use the drumsticks to type out or tap out the syllables to our name, Erica, Mary, and you go around the whole circle doing that. And then you cheer for everybody after they say their name. And then at the very end, we went around this whole circle, getting louder and louder cheering as every child taps out their name. And then Michael Fitzsimmons says, "Go crazy, drum with wild abandon, whatever you want, make as much noise as you possibly can." But because of what he had taught us, we were like in sync with each other. So we were making this music together. And I watched this kid move into the middle of our circle, step away from her walker, throw open her arms, and just dance with pure joy. She was shining. I will do library work my whole life with the Marys in the world, because I think every person deserves to dance with wild abandon and to find a friend and to be able to connect with other humans in a space that feels welcoming and inclusive and accepting. Stories communicate our value. Stories communicate our impact. Stories communicate our purpose. So, I mean, I'm so lucky that I met Mary and I'm able to share her story. I'm so lucky that I have that. So how do you find your stories? Well, the good news is there's actually a framework for finding your stories. They're not accidental. You don't have to wait around for them to come. Jamie LaRue, who is the former director of the Office of Intellectual Freedom, did this amazing thing in giving us a formula and the framework for creating stories. So in order to tell a good library story, you have to have a real person. Obviously, in this example, our person was Mary, and they have to have a real problem. Mary, obviously, her physical challenges were her problem. Her social isolation was her problem. In the story that Jamie LaRue shares, he talks about a kid named Cadence who stuttered, and that was his problem. And then there is the piece of it where the library intervenes. And because the library is there and that intervention took place, and they had a safe space, they had a welcoming space, they had access to the information that they needed, they were able to develop a relationship with a librarian who made them feel seen and heard. That's the library intervention. And because of that, there is a happy ending. There is a child dancing in joy at the end of your story, or a kid who is able to get the lead role in the school play because he no longer stutters. Or the job seeker who finally gets that job because they were able to apply through using the technology at your library. So with this in mind, we have to prioritize story gathering. And this is where library staff really empowers us. We empower each other, they empower directors, they empower board members. Sharing good library stories has to be embedded as part of your meeting culture, as part of your work culture. And directors, you might even go so far as to create time at the beginning of your meetings to share the library story of the week or the month or whatever it is. Maybe you're keeping a shared file of these stories so that you can return to them again and again and continue to add to it. And you're creating this curation of all of these incredibly powerful moments in your library. Rather than thinking of this as being one more thing that we have to do, one more part of our meetings, which I know are probably longer than you would all like already, I think you have to consider this the most important part of your meetings, the most important part of the work that you all are doing together. So gathering those stories, talking to your staff, encouraging people to make note when those magic moments happen is an important first step. But the next thing we need to talk about are words that work. When you get access to these slides, you'll see that I've hyperlinked to an article here written by Valerie Gross titled "Transforming Our Images Through Words That Work." Looking back to the beginning of this presentation, when you were describing why libraries are important or why libraries matter, we talked a little bit about how word choice is really important. I think it's more than just a little important. I think it is unbelievably important. One of the quotes from Valerie Gross that always sticks with me is that it's not only what we do and how we do it, but how we talk about what we do that commands the value that we deserve. So listed here, you can see a few examples of how one word or another can make complete difference in how we perceive something, how we feel emotionally about something. So if I say there's the liquor store, fine, it is what it is. But if we talk about spirits, there's a positivity that's infused in that. That's quite different. That feels much more engaging and opportunistic. We could talk about gambling, or we could talk about gaming. Same stuff happening in the brain, completely, well, I got to stop touching buttons here. Completely different reaction. This one's my favorite. We can go buy a used car, fine. Or we can go buy ourselves a certified pre-owned vehicle. I feel so much better about that. So much better. In libraries, this is your word. This is the most important word that works: education. Education is something that our world believes in, that our world understands, and that our society, most of the time, is willing to support. Libraries are absolutely educational spaces. Librarians are absolutely educators, 100%. But oftentimes, we do not talk about ourselves that way. Some ways to reframe our library work as educational work is that we provide self-directed education for all. Through our physical and print resources, through our books, through our journals, through our databases, you can come here and you can learn whatever you want. We provide research assistance, much like our academic counterparts, through classes, through seminars, through workshops. We provide instructional and enlightening experiences through our cultural and community-centered partnerships, through some of the big events that we run. And so whenever possible, to reframe and reinforce the idea that libraries are embedded as critical educational institutions in our community is so important. And you will have to provide examples of how that happens. You know, your amazing children's librarians roll in every week and provide incredible story times that are absolutely classes that many people in communities would pay a lot of money if you just told them that this is early literacy development. This is going to allow your child to have foundational skills in place for preschool so that they will be well prepared. This is going to help them develop social, emotional, cognitive abilities. People are willing to absolutely pay for classes that say that they will give their children those skills. And our librarians are doing it every week, multiple times a week. Another word that works. Oh, I did want to say this too. The equal opportunity in education is where we also sit apart from others. Anybody can come and get this education. There are no prerequisites. There's no standardized testing. We don't exist within the confines of curriculum. You get to come here wherever you are, wherever your current knowledge level is, and dive in. And we will help you find whatever it is that's going to feed your next step, your particular interest, your life goal. 3 pillars of education I kind of alluded to earlier. Self-directed education. I just think that's pretty cool. Research assistance, and then those instructive and enlightening experiences. So thinking to our stories, where are our stories that talk about the power of these things? This can be a way for you to think about kind of cherry picking which stories you need to pull in and you need to be aware of and ready to use. Lifelong learning or lifelong education. Lifelong learning is something that we've been talking about in libraries for a long time. But if we start using that word education, here's another place where we can slip that in there. Tying what we do to education is not only true, but it's compelling. There is no barrier to education here. No age barrier, no economic barrier. Everybody can be here for education as long as they want. Okay, the next word that works is economy. Libraries are economic drivers. That's something that we sometimes forget to talk about as well. We support job seekers, we support business development, we are a driver in commerce. Did you know that people who get in their car and drive to the library are likely to stop 3 other places? They'll probably go get coffee, they might pick up their dry cleaning, and they might stop by the hardware store to pick up a hammer. Great, we've helped feed all of those other businesses simply by existing. Aligning ourselves with the economy in our communities is really, really important because that's such a huge aspect of sustainability in our communities, people's quality of life. And there are so many things we do that support that. Some other phrases that work. I alluded to these things earlier: sustainability, preservation. We are a refuge for those marginalized populations, underserved populations, vulnerable populations. And we are critical in democratic engagement. Everybody can come to explore information on their own terms here. All right, so we've talked about words that work, and I want to talk about words that don't work. I'm going out on a little bit of a limb here, and I'll just tell you this is my own radical opinion. It just comes from me. But I believe in it so much that I felt compelled to talk about it a little bit. A lot of times we like to couch libraries as safe spaces. We like to talk about the fact that they're a safe place for kids, and everybody kind of feels warm and fuzzy about that. But there is nothing safe about open access to information and the free exchange of ideas. That's not safe. And when we set that expectation and then people encounter ideas in our libraries that don't feel safe to them, they're upset, they're angry. They feel like we've let them down because we told them that it was safe. But my definition of safe is probably not Tammy's definition of safe. My definition of what's safe for my kids is probably different than other people's definition of what's safe for their kids. You cannot create a space that's safe for everybody. So we have to stop giving this verbal agreement in which people believe that we're safe spaces. I think that this actually ends up working against us in the long run, even though in the moment it makes a nice soundbite. Words like welcoming, absolutely. Inclusive, inviting, absolutely. Safe, no. There are no guarantees of safety in a public library. Another word that I worry about, free. This is kind of that same idea where we say again and again that this is free, and then we wonder why people are puzzled or even a little bit angry when we say, we need for you to invest financially in this institution so that we can continue offering these services. Well, we've just broken the contract that we created with these folks. We told them it was free. A wise investment? Absolutely. Talk about the return on investment that people get from their libraries, 100%. Do that as often as you can. And in fact, a really cool way to do that, if you don't know about this tool, is the library calculator. This is a hyperlink in which you can, actually, maybe I can show it to you. No, maybe I can't. That's all right. You can click on this and it'll take you directly to a site that lets you enter in things like how many books you checked out, how many DVDs that you took with you, how many downloads did you get, and move through all of these things. And then you hit that button and it will tell you how much money you saved by using your library instead of running out and buying all those things. That's pretty cool stuff. Okay, the next piece of this is community alignment. So now you know about your stories and you know about using words that work. And now we have to think about how we share those stories. So community alignment is about really understanding your governance structures. How is your community run? What is the structure and operating procedure of whatever it is, your town board, your city council, your county commissioners? What is their timeline for setting a budget? What are their planning sessions? When are their planning sessions? What are their key priorities and initiatives? This one's huge. What is important to these key stakeholders in your town? Is it downtown development? Are you looking at addressing housing issues? Is there transportation infrastructure that needs to be changed? What do they have in their strategic plan for the next 5 years? What is the projected growth or decline for your community in the next 5 years? All of those things impact the library for one, so it's really important to know about. But also, when we know what's important to other people, we can engage in productive conversation with them. Not just your city and town council. These are the organizations that I think every board member, at least one board member, needs to make friends with. We need to be closely entangled with our school board, know what they're doing, know who those folks are. Our town council, specifically the planning commission, and then our economic development, whatever that is for you, whether it's your downtown development association, your chamber of commerce, your Rotary Club, whatever that is. One way to do this, actually, there's a couple of ways to do this, is you can maybe designate a liaison for each one of these entities, and they just show up. They listen at those board meetings, and then they report back to the library. Or another really smart way, if you don't have the kind of time to attend all of those meetings, is rotate through your library board members, and review all of the minutes from each one of these organizations every month, and then highlight and make note of which pieces you think the library needs to be aware of, and make that part of your monthly board meeting as well, so that there's this continued awareness of what everybody's got going on. One of the things that this allows us to do is find common language, because if we can speak to the things that are important to them, and we can use the same words that are important to your school district, we can talk about literacy, we can talk about supporting test scores, we can talk about truancy. That gets a lot of buy-in when it comes to nurturing healthy relationships. And then we can think about, what's the right story here? Do I need to share Mary's story? Do I need to share the story about Cadence? Do I need to share the story about Ralph, who got a job with us? What's the right story here? So this part's really important. if we're going to develop effective relationships with people, if we really want a healthy and thriving partnership with our city council members, with our school board members, we have to listen first. And we have to listen for a while before we ever talk about what it is that we want, what the library needs. We have to invest in that relationship. No beautiful partnership has ever begun with a quick introduction followed by a request for money. Trust has to happen first, and that requires that sustained listening and engagement, asking them questions, figuring out what's important to them. And so before we ever ask for anything, let's first think about and be willing to discuss what the library offers and contributes to every single one of these people. And again, you might think that's obvious, but we have to walk them there. We have to show them. And even if that's as far as we ever get, that's a win. We've absolutely done something important. That's good advocacy work, just by creating that awareness of everything that the library does to support all those organizations. Okay, so again, I wanted to just articulate for you a couple of ways that you could maybe make this manageable. How do you really develop these healthy relationships with people? So board liaisons are one way, or that rotating task of reviewing minutes from all community board members is another way. And there's obviously probably a million ways to do this, but as long as it's happening, that's what's important. Okay. Kind of the last piece of this is elevator pitches, which are really hard. The elevator pitch is a hard thing to develop. But you board members and you library directors, I can ask all of you right now, what are the top 3 things that you're really thinking about in your library? I'm just curious, what is going on? I mean, if you had to say, these are our top 2 priorities right now in your libraries, what are they? What was that?
Education.
I heard occupation, is that right?
Education.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Education is the top priority in your library. Great. Anybody else? I mean, do you need a new roof? Is your HVAC going to heck? What's going on?
New lights.
New lights. Yes, been there. Anybody have an upgrade to their ILS system that needs to happen? New computers that are needed? Parking lot that has to be resurfaced? Water damage that needs to get fixed? I mean, you have stuff.
We finished a bunch of stuff lately, so we're resting for a moment.
Oh,
Just for a moment.
just for a moment. So can somebody translate for me?
They're adding a learning center.
Ooh, that's cool. Oh, I like that education is already front and center for so many of you. That's amazing. So those things are a big deal. Probably most of the people in your town don't know that those things are a big deal for you unless you tell them. It's really important that your board members and your directors and your staff have good sound bites to talk about the important initiatives that you are handling to make people aware. So developing those little elevator pitches, and really you can't, probably nobody has the brain space to handle more than 3 at a time if you're going to talk effectively about those. But if you do need, let's just say your library needs a new roof and it is not in the budget, and you are going to have to figure that out, and you are going to have to go to your town council and ask for the money, or you're going to have to do a big fundraiser to raise the money, whatever it is. To take the time to make a little elevator speech about that demonstrates the need for it, talks about what resources are needed, and communicates and prioritizes and communicates that value add of the library. That way, I mean, we all experience that today. If I come to you cold and I say, talk to me about why this matters, Ooh, that gives me stress. I don't know. I'm not prepared for that. I know it matters, but I don't know how to talk to you about it. We have to practice these things. And so having a little written script, that's a great way to start preparing, and make it short enough that you can kind of memorize it and hold on to it in your head. And so we prepare for these things so that when those conversations come up and run into somebody who asks, hey, what's going on at the library? Why are you closed for 3 days? Or you show up at the town council meeting and you have the opportunity to talk with those folks, you have it ready to go. You know exactly what you're going to say, and you say it in a way that communicates every piece of information you wanted them to know. It's correct and it's compelling. Okay. I just wanted to return for a minute to this whole idea of proactive and reactive. Everything that we've talked about today, not everything, but a lot of this kind of story gathering and thinking about words that work and investing in these partnerships in your community, this is proactive advocacy. If we do this, we set ourselves up to be in a very strong position when we need to be reactive, because your community understands what you do. They understand that you are a critical educational institution in your community. They know that you have a commitment to intellectual freedom, balanced collections, because you're not safe spaces. You are spaces where people can encounter information and engage in free thought. So when those folks show up and they want to challenge the books in your collection, or they're upset about a program that you're offering, you're not undoing a perception of what the library is and what you do. People understand what you do. They understand your core values and they understand why it matters. That allows us to be more effective in that reactive space, which is why I really think that this work is so, so critical. And I know we're in this really weird time where libraries and librarians in so many communities are experiencing this craziness where people come and they're upset about the books on our shelves. But if our board and our community members and our stakeholders are well prepared and understand, this is what we do here. We provide free and open access to information because it is critical to the education across the board in our community. Great. There won't be nearly as much room to stand on. People won't say, ooh, yeah, maybe that is bad that we have that book. Why do we have that book? Maybe we should be questioning everything. They won't have that opportunity because they know what you do. They know who you are. They know what libraries stand for. Obviously, I wish I had the secret sauce to tell you that that's a guarantee. There's still going to be hard stuff that happens. But I really think that this being ready ahead of the game is critical and very empowering. All right, so quick recap here. You are going to gather your stories, which is honestly, I think, the part that's going to be really, really fun for you. That commitment to gathering the stories and then thinking about which story needs to be shared with others in your community when the time is right and that opportunity presents itself. Using words that work: education, economic drivers, sustainability, refuge, all of those things. And that article by Valerie Gross is absolutely worth reading. I read it once a year and I get so excited. Align with your community. Find those key stakeholders, make the time and commitment to investing in those relationships. And then develop your elevator pitches as your key initiatives arise so that you can talk to people about the value add of the library and the reason these initiatives are important and what the library needs in order to be successful in those initiatives. I believe that is my whole spiel for you today. So I would take any questions that you all have. And I realize that after one drinks from the fire hose, sometimes there's no brain space for questions, and that's okay too. Tammy has my email and I love to hear from anybody. I'm gathering my own library stories. So if you ever have a good one, I'd love to hear it. Did any of you think, oh yeah, this story, did any of you have kind of that light bulb when I was talking about a story that happens in your library that needs to be shared?
I have a little one, a little story. We have a lady who comes into our library every year. I think maybe this year was her last year. She's getting up there. She sells vegetables and things at a market in the summertime, you know, like the one they have at Norfolk. So in order to do that, they require that she has this permit and she has to print it and she has to have that placed at her table or whatever. Well, she doesn't have a computer at home. She doesn't really know a whole lot about computers either. So when she needs that, she'll come in and we've set up an account for her so that she can access her page and print her permit. So that's something I thought that our library does to help somebody in the community.
Yes, she could not do that without you.
That's correct. She'd have to find somewhere else, I guess.
And she wouldn't do that. I mean, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and she always wants to pay me,
Oh,
you know. So at first I was like, no, you don't have to worry about it. We don't charge for this. It's okay, you know. And she kept insisting. So finally I took the money and I said, okay, I'll put this in our donations and I'll use it to buy books. Because she wanted to give the money to me personally. You know how that's a no-no. We don't do that. But,
oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story.
I've got a story when I was director at Genoa. It was hot summertime, and I noticed a gal who was not from small town Genoa, you know, everyone, sitting around the corner from the library on her phone. And so the second day I noticed this, it's like, hey, I'm opening the library and the air conditioner's on, it'd be much cooler. So she went in there and she used the power to charge her phone. And over the next several days found out that her friends were making a road trip from Florida to California. They stopped in Genoa for gas and she went in to use the bathroom, came out and they were gone. They had left her. So she was able to charge her phone, get in contact with her dad. She had no money. Her dad had no money to get her back. So I got her in contact with Simon House in Columbus, the next town, where they bought her a bus ticket. So I brought her there, got her food and on her bus ticket so she could go back home to Florida. I always wondered what happened to her, but noticing this poor, smelly young girl in the heat of the summer, coming to the library where it's cooler, charged her phone and made her way back home.
That's incredible. That really gets at that, the way that we care for vulnerable populations. That's an amazing story. Yeah. Well, I hope that this has inspired you to go back to your libraries and have conversations about your stories. I know you all have, I mean, my gosh, probably hundreds. Every single patron that you interact with has a story. And just kind of knowing that you now have these glasses, these fake glasses that you'll put on to kind of watch for those stories too. Instead of just taking for granted, because we take ourselves for granted. This is just what we do, right? Like, of course, we're going to help this young girl. And of course, we're going to help this woman print what she needs. It's just what we do. And it is, but boy, every single one of those things is exceptional and worth highlighting. So I wish you all the best as you continue to advocate for this profession. I thank you all for the incredible service that you provide, because I know that it is an investment of your time and your hearts, and that's a big deal. So Tammy, I really appreciate you sharing some time in this gathering with me today. And if any other questions do come up, feel free to reach out to me at any point. Otherwise, I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Larry. And she's gone.